If you buy and sell coins, you should know about the Professional Numismatics Guild. This organization began in 1955 and now has more than 250 members nationwide who are experts in buying and selling rare coins and precious metals. The PNG is founded on the principles of knowledge, responsibility, and integrity in the rare coin business. PNG members have the highest personal, financial, and ethical standards in the coin industry. When you deal with a member of the Professional Numismatics Guild, you can expect to be treated fairly and have the assurance of doing business with a recognized professional. Whether your interests are investing, collecting, or just learning more about rare coins, there's a PNG member near you. You can find out more about buying and selling rare coins by calling area code 818-781-1764 or write P.O. Box 430, Van Nuys, California 91408. You'll receive a free brochure and the PNG directory listing 250 of the nation's top rare coin dealers. Call the PNG today.
The following is a program in the series Living History, sponsored by the Professional Numismatics Guild, featuring prominent PNG members. Jerry, you started in coins right after the war. You started in coins right after the war.
Mm-hmm.
What was your first effort in the coin market?
Well, when you say effort, I mean, what did I do to get started? Like everybody else, I took a certain amount of money that I had acquired during the war years and started by inventory that appealed to me and started to put it in the showcases, did some local advertising, and little by little built up a following in Tucson to where my shop actually turned into a clubhouse because I was living at home and did not have the ordinary expenses of a family. And I remember the doctors and the other professional people that would come in and we'd just sit around and gab, and the last thing I tried to do was sell coins to them. And little by little they became interested and the business more or less flourished. And I decided that I had gone as far as I could in Tucson. We had advertised considerably. We used to go to all the conventions, and everything that I bought at the convention, when we came back to Tucson, we'd stay up all night typing up price lists and sending them out. Then my daughters were growing up and had an opportunity to come west to LA and to go into business in Beverly Hills, and that was in '57. And since that time, which is over 30 years ago, we've devoted all our efforts to cultivating a collector here in Beverly Hills, here in California, and around the world. We've traveled quite a bit. We've attended most of the major conventions, and as a matter of fact, this year, for the first time, I will not be in Cincinnati. And this convention will be missed, but I couldn't help it. The first convention I attended was in Phoenix, Arizona, and one of the highlights of that convention, beside a sandstone, was the fact that Saul Kaplan got married.
What year was that?
Oh, gosh. It had to be about maybe it was about 51, something like that. A long time ago. So anyway, we've enjoyed all these conventions. We've enjoyed all the people we've met. We've made many friends. We had many friends in the fraternity itself. Some of the finest gentlemen, people that were real numismatists, people that knew their business, have come on the scene and have helped establish what is certainly one of the most interesting hobbies in the world. I miss a lot of the old folks, and I think of them quite often, and I think of the people that may have preceded them, the B.G. Johnsons, the Ferran Zerbys, all those famous names that actually were the basis of our industry.
What are some stories about some of those people that have helped to make the numismatic market what it is today?
Well, there isn't so much stories as the legacy that they left behind. The books that they left behind have been an important facet. I mean, Sheldon, with his book on large cents, certainly was the basis of a tremendous interest in the variety's large sense. Al Overton, with the work that he did on half dollars. So each one of these professional dealers left something behind that will last forever and will continue to be of interest to the future collectors. Books that were written by B. Max Mell, his auction catalogs, have been very, very useful and helpful to many of the dealers. He left a style which has been imitated, but I doubt if it can be equaled. I'm just trying to think of some of the other names. There are so many of them.
Well, you have a picture of yourself sitting with B. Max Mell.
Yeah, this one right here.
Uh-huh.
This goes back. This is an interesting picture. This particular book is a copy of the Adolphe Monjou sale. And the coin illustrated in the book is the same coin that I have here in front of me in a plastic case. And the coin was a Roman numeral 20, described as a matte proof. I forget who I bought it from, but anyway, it was, when I had it in the showcase, B. Max Mell walked by, he saw it, he says, "I doubt it." And that was my introduction. I got to like him fast, but it was funny. He's knocking a coin that I think he had sold. Here you can see this was an advent of plastics in the sense we had to have some holders made up for the dimes and sets like that, and plastic certainly played an important part in the forward movement of coin collecting. It made it more convenient than the old type Whitman folders and the Raymond folders. This other gentleman next to me was a single man, a collector from Texas, and we met him at a convention in Texas, and he took a liking to us, and he actually moved out of Texas and moved into Tucson, Arizona. And he was like a godfather to me. He was in the shop every day, and I learned a lot from him because he did have an outstanding collection, and we shared a lot of information. These were important days to me, the so-called foundation. And I enjoyed talking to all these fellows and learning from each and every one of them. Today it's difficult, I think, to meet some of these people and to talk to them because there aren't that many going around. But if you could get to talk to Eric Newman or get to talk to John Ford or get to talk to some of these other true numismatists, I think that you'll find a lot of knowledge still available, and knowledge that is not written down. I consider John Ford an outstanding numismatist, and things that he could tell us about territorial gold, and the things that he can tell us about the other series would fill many books. He had a very close connection with Raymond, and I remember years ago going into his office when it was the New Netherlands Coin Company, and he was a partner with Charles Wormser. And you could take your pick from complete collections of Lincoln cents or collections of proof sets. He had those in quantity. Another great source of coins at the time was a fellow named Charlie Green. And the business was conducted under the name of R. Green, his wife Ruth. And Charlie Green was not exactly a well man, but he was a good numismatist, and his operation was in Chicago. And he really had a big inventory, and I'll never forget an incident. I was in Chicago, and one of the coins I bought from him was a $50 round Panama Pacific. And you would think he would be careful. He'd put it into a cellophane envelope, something like that. Instead, he just wraps it up in a piece of paper and hands it to me. And his wife got so mad, Charlie, what are you doing? Is that the way to handle a $500 coin? Anyway, that was Charlie. He was a nice guy. And another deal of importance in that area was Aubrey Beebe. And to this day, he's one of the outstanding numismatists, and especially in the field of paper money. I doubt very much if there are many that have the knowledge that Aubrey has. All throughout the country we had some people that were real lovers of coins as well as coin dealers. In San Francisco, I'll never forget walking into Earl Parker's office and looking at, I think it was either 5 or 6 1894 S dimes. And he told me the story about those, and he offered to sell me one of them. But at the time, the price that he wanted was more than I paid for my home in Tucson. So I couldn't equate one with the other. And ultimately, he sold one to a dealer in Santa Barbara named Bill Johnson. And many, many years later, I bought the one that Bill owned and gave him $25,000. So I've had those a few times. Trying to think back of some of the names that flashed by and the coins that flashed by. There was a collector named O.L. Harvey from Seminole, Oklahoma, who had a fantastic collection of gold in territorial as well as other series. And believe it or not, from him, we bought not one, but 2 of the ultra-high relief 20s. And what a thrill it was to own those. I think we sold one to Abe Kosoff, and I'm not sure, but another one may have gone to Dave Bowers. On another occasion, I got a call from Leo Young, who had purchased ultra-high relief, and I made a deal with him and flew up to San Francisco and bought it from him. And in the course of a conversation, I mentioned it to another prominent collector in the Chicago area, a fellow named Jake Bell. And Jake Bell was a very famous collector. And he says, you don't have a high relief. He says, I'd pay you $50 in your plane fare just to look at it. Well, I was going to New York anyway, so I stopped in to see him in Chicago, and I think he aged a little bit when I showed him the coin. His son, Dave Shapiro, took over the coin business, Rare Coa, with another dealer there, and Dave lasted quite a while and now lives down in the South somewhere. So anyway, we've had a lot of interesting experiences. We've met a lot of interesting people from all walks of life. It's been a marvelous hobby, and I think it'll continue to be that way, although the changes that are being met with today sometimes are too much for me to handle. I don't mind progress, and I can understand the trends have changed considerably over these years. I've always cultivated the collector, and will continue to do so as long as I'm able to.
How about the early days of the PNG? You're number 6 in the membership.
Well, the early days of the PNG, we had the right idea in forming this guild. Actually, the brainstorm, of course, was Saul Kaplan and Abe Kosoff. We just could see the handwriting on the wall. We could see that the industry was growing, and we needed an organization of professionals because the future of the coin business depended on the reliability of the people that were selling these coins. And we had, during that period, we had a lot of people that were not behaving properly towards the public. And the purpose of the PNG was to give the public the honesty and the reliability and the knowledge that a professional dealer could convey to them. Saul Kaplan was a real driving force in this case. As a matter of fact, Saul was a driving force throughout his years as a professional numismatist. He was an early innovator, and I think his background may have been in the brokerage business, I'm not sure. But he was a merchandiser. I remember at one of the conventions he set up a blackboard with the first buy and sell bids on proof sets. And it went over very successfully. I remember then Dave Bowers as a young numismatist and as a budding professional running around paying higher prices for the 36 proof sets than anybody else. Everybody thought he was a little off base, but he knew what he was doing, as he always has. There's no one that can say enough about Abe Kosoff. He certainly added a lot of luster and knowledge to the coin business, and he more or less modeled his actions and his methods after B. Max Mell. Today there are many people that sort of model themselves after B. Max Mell with their catalog output and knowledge. And I think there are people growing up today that will be just as active and is just as reliable for the future collectors. One of the things that I feel we've sorely put aside through no fault of ours, I guess, is the so-called young collector. The kids that used to come into our shops on Saturday morning with their quarters and with their dollars, buy the Blue Book, buy the Whitman coin album, and fill it up with pennies and nickels and so forth. These kids are gone, I'm afraid. And I haven't come up with the answer of how do you bring them back into the fold. So maybe under the heading of progress, they've progressed to other areas.
Okay.
However, they will come back as they get older and find out how interesting and enlightening coin collecting can be, whether it's U.S. or foreign.
Jerry, you have some of the older coin publications there with you. Could you tell us some stories about those?
Well, I can't tell you much of a story about this one, but it's called the Cohen Coin Book, 6th edition, and it was distributed by Abe Kosoff when he was at 82 Bowery in New York. This addition to my library was given to me by Dave Bowers, and I wish I could find out more about it, but I'm sure that it's Abe's answer to the B. Max Mell Star Catalog, although this one here doesn't offer to buy the 1913 nickels. But it's interesting, and I treasure it because it's a page out of the past. Another page out of the past was the Numismatic Scrapbook magazine, which was the true Bible of the coin business for many years, published by the Hewitt brothers in Chicago. In this publication, you'll see the ads of so many of the dealers whose names I've mentioned, starting off with R. Green. Here in this ad, he's offering $2.50 gold pieces, choice unk, $9.50. Bear in mind, this is March 1950. Things were fairly cheap. In 1950, they hadn't made up their mind to have proof sets, but ultimately they did. And I remember when these proof sets came out, there hadn't been any made since 1942, And in order for me to get clients interested in these proof sets, they cost $2.10 a set, and I remember selling them in the shop for below cost just to get the ball started. I should have bought some for my family. Throughout this magazine, there were interesting articles and interesting stories, but the ads themselves were the appealing one. Here's an ad from J.V. McDermott. J.V. McDermott's claim to fame was the pride and ownership he had of a 1913 nickel. And everyone knows the story of how he would send this coin around the country, and he displayed it with pride. And I have two interesting stories to tell about McDermott. One is very funny. We were at a convention in Chicago, and McDermott used to spend a lot of time at the bar with a collector named P.B. Trotter from Memphis, Tennessee. P.B. Trotter was a specialist in the 1839 half dollars. Anyway, he always wanted to own this nickel. And they'd sit around the bar, and P.B. would say, "I'll give you $25,000 for it." And McDermott would say, "No, I want more." Anyway, he didn't intend to sell it. So after they were drinking and drinking, now it was time to attend the banquet. And walking into the banquet, McDermott was standing in the doorway, and I forget who the master of ceremonies was, but he's introducing everybody. He says, "Here we have people, the Deathridges from Alaska. Here we have people from Florida. Here we have people from the state of Maine." And McDermott hollers out, "Is there anybody here from the state of intoxication?" Well, he broke up the place, but that was McDermott. He was funny. Because he left South Milwaukee during the wintertime, he traveled the southern route, and the first time I met him, he came into my shop in Tucson, and I didn't know what he looked like because I'd never seen his picture. But this sort of characterish fellow walks in, and he reaches in his pocket and he throws down a 1796 quarter uncirculated. And he says, "I just inherited this coin. Would you be interested in it?" And I took a look at the coin. I almost had a heart attack. And I didn't know what to say, because all of a sudden you have to become a psychologist. And he says, "Well, if you can't make up your mind about that, how about this one?" He throws down a 1793 red unk large cent. And I said, "Holy mackerel, what's going on?" He says, "Well, as long as you're so confused, how about this?" And he takes out the nickel, and I said, "You son of a bitch." That's how I met J.V. McDermott. He stayed in Tucson many winters. Here we have an ad from Beebe offering the 1950 Booker T. Washington sets at $8.50 a set. Hollenbeck Stamp and Coin, before it became Arthur Kagan's, or before his title was put on it. Arthur and Paul were partners at that time, and they had a tremendous inventory. If you go to any of the conventions, the convention could be a success if you had material for art. He used to walk around and fill up his pockets, and I don't know if he changed the color of his suit, but his pockets always grew. We had so many interesting people. Another, Arthur Kahn, whose specialty was the commemorative half dollars. He lived in Melrose, Massachusetts, and now resides in Florida. Ben Stamp and Coin. This was Ben Dreisky's company, which became Rare Core, now owned by Ed Milas. Frank Caton, who's still in business. Here we have an ad. Brilliant uncirculated 31 cents, $45 per roll. That was pretty cheap. Jim Kelly at one time had quite a few of the rolls of these. And on it goes. Here's an ad from Hofecker, who was dealing in rare nickel rolls, 1946, that's $5.50 a roll. Tove Johnson was another expert and a specialist in the field of commems. He had a big inventory. Very nice fellow. Page after page after page of the backbone of our industry. Saul Kaplan didn't advertise too much. He advertised a paper money holder for $3, but that didn't give any indication of the business that he did, especially with Abe Kossoff. Here's an ad of mine on page 260. U.S. $5 gold coins. I need 25 Liberty Head pieces of the $5 right away. We'll pay $9.50 each. I sure was a sport. But at the same time, I was selling $20 gold pieces for under $50. So one hand took care of the other. Lee Hewitt, the publisher, passed away just a few years ago. And he was really a great fellow and did a lot for our industry. So anyway, that takes care of this particular book. Although on the back page, here's a full-page ad from B. Max Mel offering some bargains. For example, here you could buy an 1861 $half uncirculated. It cataloged $4, and he was trying to sell it for $1.65. I wonder how he made out with his ad. Another interesting photograph was taken at a PNG convention. And I could go up and down, row after row, and tell you names, but I'll mention a few. You won't be able to see them, but take my word for it, they're here. Earl Parker, San Francisco. Dan Brown, Colorado. Harvey Stack, Norman Stack, New York. Ben Dreisky, Chicago. Arthur Kahn, Massachusetts. Jim Ruddy, when they were up in Binghamton. Dave Bowers, Hans Schulman, Peter Seeby, I've forgotten this fellow's name, Wilson Pollard, Leo Young, Max Justice, George Justice, Abe Kossoff, John Pittman, Al Overton, Saul Kaplan, Harry Foreman, the Friedberg brothers, Bob and Jack, Tom Moss, Arthur Kahn, Dick Picker, the Beebes, Mike Coleman, Arthur Whiteneck, Criswell, Steinberg, Henry Criswell. Very familiar names, and each and every one of them a true gentleman. One of the interesting things about the coin business was the honesty and the respect we had for each other. Things have changed so much. I remember when we went to the coin conventions, we didn't wait for the day of the convention to begin. We'd rush from room to room, visiting all these dealers and purchasing coins in their rooms. And I can just see that happening today. There's been so many changes, and for sake of a better word, we'll call it progress. I like the past, but I can't live in the past, so I'm looking forward to the future. And I'm sure it'll be an excellent one for all, as long as treat each other and treat your client with respect and give them their money's worth. You can't retire from one sale.
When the commemorative coins were coming out in the 50s, did the people feel about them then the way the public feels about them now today? I mean,
They look forward to them more before, even though there seemed to have been some dispute about the Booker T. Washingtons and the George Washington Carvers. They didn't really run after those. But there's always been a demand, and always will be a demand for these, because they're so much part of the history. And as far as the feeling, I think this is a series that will always command the attention of the public because of the variety and because of the limited quantities.
how about the new commemoratives? How do you feel they'll play in the role of numismatics in the long term?
In the long term, everything comes back. Right now, the market is somewhat reluctant to get involved. Maybe it's because they're making so many of them. But time takes care of everything, and I'm sure that as new collectors come in and they decide they want some of these Constitution issues and Olympic issues, you'll see a strengthening of the market and an increase in the demand.
How about the grading issue? Third-party grading has come along, and what are your thoughts there?
The public wants a guarantee, and they feel that PCGS and NCI and all these others are the guarantee that they can't get from other dealers. The unfortunate thing is the dealers with repute know grading, know their coins, and they're not ready to accept the so-called standards set by people that don't know. If you were to take a survey amongst the top echelon of dealers, they think that they know more about grading than some of the people that are being hired today to grade the coins. I can't find too much fault with it. If that's what the public wants, that's what the public gets. But bear in mind that if you can show me the difference between a coin that grades MS-61 and MS-62, I'd like to have my eyes examined by the same doctor. It's a difficult thing, and the price spreads are such that I wonder what the future will hold when these prices when these pieces that are MS-65 today, 10 years from now, they find out that now they're MS-40 because we've got a new grade of MS-99.5. It's a situation that'll iron itself out. It just takes time.
What would you say is the difference between the coin collectors or buyers of today versus the coin buyers of 20, 30 years ago when...
Well, the coin buyer today is still very interested. If you were to take various aspects of collecting, the specialist in large sense, a very, very avid collector, the collector of seated dimes and quarters, very avid collector. He's not buying for investment as much as he is for the pleasure and for the pride of ownership. We have some big money, to coin a phrase, coming into the coin business today that are buying up the so-called Rembrandts and the Renoirs. There were never that many to go around to begin with, so now that these $100,000 coins are being gobbled up, we'll have a chance to see them, but only in the Smithsonian and a few places like that, because they're really going to disappear. I personally suggest that the collector of today and satisfy himself with the coins that he can afford, whether that's a circulated type coin or whatever it is. Buy for the pleasure, buy for the pride of ownership. There aren't that many collectors today that can afford to go out and spend $40,000, $50,000, $100,000 or whatever it takes to buy some of these coins. What you've never owned, you'll never miss.
How about the role of the coin organizations, PNG, ANA? What do they need to do to help the coin industry now for the future?
Well, years ago, Max Schwartz used to say, buy the book before you bought the coin. Dave Bowers has always preached education. And if these organizations will just find the time to preach education and to cultivate the young breed of collectors by giving talks at schools possibly, but doing what they can to make certain that the coin business just doesn't become a banking business.
Any other thoughts on coins in the future?
I guess I've said it all. Just as long as you enjoy what you're doing and can afford to do it, go to it. That's it.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.